Okay, and today I have the pleasure of introducing Bert. So, Bert is a Fictionary Certified Story Coach Editor, which, of course, I'm very happy about. And she's been in this community for quite a while, and so many of you might know her. She has an MFA in creative writing and belongs to the Horror Writers Association, Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association, New England Horror Writers. She has a small press company, Transformation by, oops, my cursor's in the way, Obsidian Butterfly, and at the same time, sorry, this time only publishing anthologies. The thing that I like about Bert's profile is this. She's neurodivergent, cyborg swamp witch living on the edge of a frog pond in Connecticut with her spouse, cats, and an impressive collection of rubber lizards. So clearly, Bert is our expert in horror and writes horror. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she has to say. So Bert, do you want to go ahead and share your screen?
I thought I was.
Okay, so
Um,
just try again. If you go down to the green button,
okay.
there
Got
we
it?
are. It's there, Bert. Writing horror with Fictionary. And you can see she's got her Fictionary Certified Story Coach Editor badge on the bottom. Dun, dun. Yay.
All right. So I'm really sad that you guys can't see me, and I might upload a picture of what I look like because, yeah, I went all out today. I have special hair, I have makeup. Yeah, so I'm bummed that my camera is not functioning. Anyway, I'm Bert Piedmont. I'm a Fictionary story coach. And I'm an award-winning horror author as of last weekend, and I want to show you how writing horror is a little bit different from writing other genres. So I was wondering, I lost my chat. Hang on, let me see if I can get it back. Um, where did it go? Chatty chat. There we go. Um, I was wondering how many of you already write horror? If you write horror, put a 1 in the chat. If you want to learn how to write horror, put a 2 in the chat. If you just read horror, put a 3 in the chat. And if you're just here because you like me, put a 4 in the chat. So I want to just see if there's just any people who like Bert. So I would like to hold questions to the end. This isn't very long, though it could be way longer. You can do a hand raise emoji, or if you want to put your questions in the chat with like a bunch of asterisks around them so that they're easy for me to find, that would be cool. So, why do we want to write horror? Horror teaches us to fight monsters. When I was at StokerCon this year, my chapter, the New England chapter of the Horror Writers Association, helped to run it, including me. It was so awesome. We were at the awards banquet, and I don't remember who, but somebody said horror teaches us to fight monsters, and it was so amazing. I immediately wrote it on my program, and then I ran back up to my room afterwards and I put it on my Facebook profile, and it was just so enlightening to me. Whether you're reading horror or writing horror, remember that monsters come in so many forms and they are so scary, but we can fight them. And that's just the takeaway from today, from anything you read, from any form of horror that you're watching, or reading, that any monster can be fought. So, Julia put the picture of me. So that is what I look like. Now you can see what you are missing, the animated version of me and my beautiful background. So, the basis of all stories, whether they're horror or not, is there is a person, they are in a place, and they have a problem. So, in Act 1, the person figures out where they are and what the problem is. In Act 2, they try to solve the problem in various ways. And in Act 3, they succeed or fail in solving the problem, and then there are some consequences. I was wondering, have any of you ever heard of this basic background and basic breakdown before? I'm going to put a 1 in the chat for yes, or a 2 for no. So great. So every genre tweaks this a little bit. So in a mystery, the problem might be a murdered body or a missing person or some stolen jewels. In a fantasy, maybe there's a dragon attacking the town or there's a rogue wizard that has imprisoned the king. But in horror, it's pretty basic. There's a monster and it's in the house. There's also another level you can look at that has to do with time. In fantasy, we look backwards. We go back in time. In science fiction, we look forward in time. In horror, we're in the present and we just want everything to be normal again. And have you ever thought about different genres in this way? And does this make sense to you if you want to put a 1 for yes or a 2 for no? Oh, and I'm seeing some of my friends in here. This is so fun. Even though my friends know me and they're bored because they know all this. So the focus in most genres, we talk a lot about characters and inner character growth and outer character problems. And that happens in horror as well. There is character conflict, there's character interaction, and it's not neglected in horror, but the focus in horror is going to be, are you going to survive and what trauma are you going through? And the character growth in horror comes through that urge to survive and that trauma that you're going through. The interpersonal conflicts are your B plot, your subplot behind whatever's going on with your monster. I see Alexandria asked, no, you do not have to write horror in the present tense. That's easy. The 2 examples I'm going to use today are going to be the book Misery, which was written by Stephen King in 1987, and the movie The Thing, directed by John Carpenter in 1982. And I'll throw a couple links in the chat right now if you haven't read or seen those. Is everybody at least a little bit familiar with those? Because obviously there's going to be spoilers because The Thing is 43 years old. So yes, prepare for those to be spoiled, but they're still worth reading and watching, even if you have not already read or seen them. So, what is horror? Other genres might have horrible or terrible or scary items, but for a true horror story, there has to be certain elements. The protagonist should be trapped and they should survive something monstrous. The theme should be something along the line of survival and trying to avoid death. The main emotion should be fear and terror. There are just 2 possible endings. One ending is life, where the monster is overcome. The other ending is death, where the monster wins. Minor characters are often killed, and there are often fake scares to lull the reader or the audience, but then they mimic real scares later. So let's say they're checking in the cabinets. Okay, there's nothing in the cabinets. So you think, hey, the cabinets are good. But later on, guess what? There's something horrible in the cabinets, and you've been thinking the cabinets are good, the cabinets are safe. You know, you can go in the cabinet and get a fork or whatever. No, never think that. There's a monster in the cabinet, trust me, because I'm going to put one there. So, an excellent new book just came out. Oh, I don't have the link. Christina, could you drop the link for Save the Cat Writes Horror, please? An excellent new book just came out, which is Save the Cat Writes Horror. And hopefully someday we'll have a fictionary horror book, which maybe I will write, who knows. And based on that, horror requires 4 things, 3 of which will probably be familiar to you, and 1 will probably be not familiar. House, which is your setting, a monster, which is your antagonist, a person, which is your protagonist, and the sin, which is your catalyst, right? Which is pretty simple, 4 things. but you can make each of these elements as complex as you want. So can everybody see the possibilities of these four things? So put a 1 for yes, and you can put a 2 if you're confused. And we're going to be going into more details in the next slide. So just hang on. So first, we're going to talk about the house, right? Uh-oh, looks like I don't have my notes for the house, so I'm going to have to wing it. So the house can be any building. It doesn't have to be an building. It could be an island. It could be a cave. It could be a spaceship, or it could be a set of social mores. So it has to be isolated and impossible to escape. If at any point in your story, the reader or the audience thinks, why don't they just leave? You have failed at creating your house. Okay. So when you're setting up your house, you need to make sure the audience will never think that it's easy to leave. Okay. Now the monster. The monster can be physical monster, a mental illness, an illness like a pandemic, which is my next book. It could be a bunch of monsters like a zombie horde, or it can even be other people. You can invent a new monster. The monster might be society. You can take an existing monster template and turn it inside out. Let's say it could be deep sea vampires. Okay. Does anybody ever think that vampires could live at the bottom of the ocean? What would that look like? So, writing is always a game of what if. The person is your protagonist. They should never be a hero. They should never be a chosen one. Okay. They need to be an ordinary person with flaws. If you're doing a slasher, this is your final girl, your final guy. That's the person, the survivor left behind after a killing spree. The reader or the audience should feel empathy and sympathy for your person. They're the average Joe, the girl next door. They're the person who falls down when they run away. They lose their keys. They talk loud when they should be quiet. They do all of the things that make you yell at the screen in the movies. Okay. They are not a superhero with bulging muscles and a giant gun. Okay. I mean, yes, once in a while you get an Arnold Schwarzenegger type, but that's rare. And now the sin. This is the most difficult of the four concepts to understand. And I didn't know about it when I first wrote horror. And when I found out about it, I had to go back and look at my books and see if I had a sin. And I was very happy that I did have one, even though I didn't know it was supposed to be there. So that was cool. The sin has to relate back to the monster. Somebody somewhere did something bad, and that's why the monster exists. This person created the monster. They let the monster loose, or they turned into the monster. Sometimes the sin is related to the person's trauma, although the person does not have to have committed the sin. So for instance, in my book, Fat Monster, the main character, Becca, is full of self-hatred over being overweight. And the monster is an alien that literally eats fat people. And there's a mad scientist called Dr. Lee who knows full well what the monster is, but he facilitates it because, hey, aliens are cool, right? So, do you understand the four parts? 1 for yes, 2 for no. So, I'm going to do a real quick how to write a book in 3 acts, a regular book versus a horror book. So this is pretty basic. In Act 1, in a regular book, you introduce your character and conflict begins. But in horror, right, this is where you trap your people in a house with a monster. In Misery, Paul's legs are broken, so he can't leave Annie Wilkes's house, and he's dependent on her for the painkillers she has him addicted to. In The Thing, the men are in Antarctica, and eventually they have no helicopter or radio. Everyone is at the nearest base is dead, and that base is destroyed. In Act 2, the middle, is generally where the characters deal with the conflict. In horror, this is where the monster attacks. In Misery, Annie leaves Paul alone for 2 days and then forces him to burn the only copy of his newest novel in order to get his pain medicine. In The Thing, the dog thing tears apart the sled dogs and then absorbs them, so now the humans know, oh, that's not a real Siberian Husky. In Act 3, the end, is general where the conflict is resolved in a satisfying and cathartic way. However, in horror, that's when the heroes have to get out of the house and back to safety, or so they believe. In Misery, Paul bludgeons Annie to death with an antique typewriter. But when the police arrive to save him, her body's missing. In The Thing, the base is burned and the things are destroyed, or are they? And now here's our familiar fictionary story arc, which is for every genre. So you're still going to put all of your plot points in the same spot. It doesn't matter what genre they are, you still need to balance your story across this familiar arc. Only your content changes. Still has to be all set up the same way. So now I'm going to talk about the fictionary core scenes and how you want to adapt them for horror. So the inciting incident shakes up the protagonist's ordinary life. However, in a horror story, instead of establishing normal and ordinary, the world is all subtly or majorly wrong and hints at the presence of the monster. And the setting, the house, is established. So think about Rick Grimes awakening in the hospital in The Walking Dead. That's pretty awesome. And plot point 1 shows the protagonist accepting the story goal. But in horror, the protagonist often refuses to accept the problem of the monster or ignores warnings from other characters. The middle plot point shows the protagonist, changing from reactive to proactive. If there was no middle plot point, the protagonist couldn't drive the story forward, and there would be no story. But in horror, the stakes get raised even more. The monster begins to focus on the person, and there often is a ticking clock or other twist. Plot point 2 is the lowest point. In horror, this is often called the whiff of death. There's no redemption. There's more suffering. Someone dies, and they begin to believe that the monster is completely unbeatable. The climax shows if the protagonist is going to achieve the story goal or not. In horror, this involves a shocking twist, a fake out, or a double ending. This is where you have your person versus monster showdown. And there has to be a person versus monster showdown. Now, the resolution is kind of the bonus event, the 6th of the 5th basic events. This gives the reader closure. However, in a horror story, the resolution is not clear. The problems are not solved. The ending is ambiguous. The monster is not fully vanquished. I love the ending of The Thing. The movie is 43 years old. You can find brand new discussions on the internet of what that ending means. That is how classic that movie is. And that's it. I didn't really do a half hour because I had to start a little bit late. But so I'll put my links in again, and now I'll do my questions. I'll scroll back up and see, or if somebody just wants to,
Julia would like to see plot point one again.
she would like to see plot point. Okay.
And do you have a specific question, Julia?
I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more. Could you give an example, like in your own book? Could you talk about what that plot point looked like for you, so I can understand better how it's
Sure.
different?
So in like my book, Fat Monster, um, the inciting incident was my character losing her job and being on the verge of becoming homeless. And she was offered a place in this multi-level marketing scheme. And of course she says, no, I don't want to be a salesperson. I don't want to sell weight loss shakes. Look how fat I am. No one is going to buy weight loss shakes from me. And then she realizes she has no choice. She has to do something when her mother sends her a scale and says, well, I'll send you money when you lose more weight. And she basically calls up her friend and says, fine, I'll join your weight loss company. So she originally was like, I'm not doing it. These shakes are gross. I'm not selling them. And then she calls her mother again and says, please give me some money. I lost my job. And her mother's like, here's a scale, lose weight. So, there's almost always in a horror, there's a refusal, the refusal of the call that's common to the hero's journey.
So let's talk about this just a little bit more on plot point one. So it's the protagonist accepting the story goal. So does that mean in this scene the protagonist accepts the goal of trying to survive? And the other requirement, because it's horror, it's a genre specific, they refuse to accept the problem of the monster or ignore warnings?
Right. They don't usually accept it right away. So it's kind of a multi-step thing. Like there's a monster and they're just like, there's not a monster. I don't want to deal with the monster. And then they have to, the acceptance of the monster, it's a more nuanced, it's a
Okay.
more nuanced kind of plot point one, because first they're like, no monster, I don't want to deal with it, I don't accept it. And then they have to come around to, yeah, there's a dude with an axe outside my window.
I don't like that dude.
Yeah, no one likes that dude.
Belinda would like to know. So she says she's struggling with her climax. She knows she's supposed to be person versus monster, but her monster is too powerful for the person to vanquish.
Well, it may be one where the story ending is death, where the monster wins. That doesn't mean that the person dies, but it may be that all that happens is the person runs away and leaves the monster there.
Okay.
You know, you
Yeah, that's
you get
probably more. Yeah, yeah, that seems like. But how do I make a climax where she just runs away? That seems boring. Ah, run away.
well, well, you maybe the fact that she thought she was gonna die and that she gets away to live another day.
Okay. So, yeah.
That it looks like all is lost. So, plot point two is the all is lost moment, the whiff of death moment, whatever. So if she's so down and out in plot point two, and she's like, there is absolutely no way I can beat this monster. This monster is gonna kill me. And then some way in the climax, she gets to the point where maybe she hurts the monster enough or distracts the monster enough that she can get away alive to live another day. And
So
that's more than she hoped for.
Julia has an excellent, she loses everything. So here you could have a case, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that she's the only one who survives. Nobody else does. And so you have a
Ooh.
climax where she fails at protecting whoever is with her, friends, loved ones, pets, I don't know, whatever. And she
Ooh.
fights hard and gets away. And so the climax is very dramatic and it's a tragic ending because she loses everything, but yet she's still alive. Is that what you mean, Julia?
That sounds grim.
Yeah, I keep talking about Maplethorpe because that's one of the things that happens. She succeeds, but she loses her family. She loses everything she was fighting for. And in the end, it's not Cthulhu, it's more deep, the deep ones, I think. Bert
Yeah.
would know better.
Yeah,
But
I just finished reading it, but yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
satisfying though? I mean, if she's got like, I'm fighting for my friends and my loved one, and now they're all dead and I get away. That just feels like, oh man, really? People want to read that?
well,
Bert,
I
could
mean,
you
you have
talk
to,
about Maplethorpe since you just read it?
well, I mean, so basically it's a redo of um oh my God, what's her name? The axe murderer, right?
Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie
Lizzie
Borden.
Borden, thank you. So it posits that yes, she did kill her parents, but she killed them because they were turning into monsters, and she's trying to save her town from these monsters.
Right.
So she ends up estranged from her sister that she loves, and the whole town hates her for being an axe murderer, but she's really going around at night with her axe and killing monsters, and she loses the love of her life to the monsters, and she's a person of, scorn and derision, but she knows that she's doing the right thing. So, it is sad, but she knows why she did it. And she does, they do that. There's like a secondary big monster who comes, and with the help of a couple of people, they do destroy it. And there's that happy ending that they kill the secondary monster, and they stop this, giant thing that's coming, and that would have taken out the whole town, but they can't ever tell anyone what they did. And one of her friends goes mad, and basically he has dementia, and she just goes and sits with him, and it's, kind of just bittersweet. And there's a sequel that I'm just starting to read too. So, you have to decide for yourself. If that's too much for you, then you have to maybe tone the monster down and make it so she can defeat it and maybe save a few of her friends.
Yeah, this might be a discovery book for me.
Yeah.
Like when I get there, I'm like, oh, this has to happen or this doesn't happen. I've done that. I did that before. I'm like, this person's gonna survive. Nope, they didn't. I mean, I
Well, I
plotted
mean,
out that somebody, like in another book I wrote, I plotted out that somebody was going to survive. Like, that she was brought back from the dead. But I'm like, you know what? Actually, no, she's gonna die. So yeah, I didn't want. It wasn't until I wrote it that I was like, yeah, it works better this way.
yeah, I mean, I've killed characters in books and not wanted to, and tried to replot it so they lived, and been like, they can't live. Like, I hate this. I hate
Mm-hmm.
killing this person, but they can't live. Like, it
I
kills
just,
the
I
whole.
just I could just hear people like being like, I can't believe you killed her. Yep.
Yep.
I'm an evil
Because you
person.
because you have to, because to make the plot work, that person has to die.
Right. Yeah.
Because that person's death is motivation for something else to happen. I see
Yeah.
that Julia asked how I made my world off from the beginning. Well, I started off by saying that the world was one step off from our world, like throwing the fact that it was called New Haven, all one world, and I spelled Connecticut wrong, and I threw pyramids all over New Haven. So right then and there, you're already saying, well, what's going on here? Why is Connecticut spelled wrong, and why does New Haven have pyramids in it? And and then just the whole way that she gets sucked into the multi-level marketing just gets wronger and wronger and wronger. It's so off that, that's where I bring in the wrongness, is through the multi-level marketing, and the products that she has to sell and consume are just so gross, and she's the only one that seems like they understands how gross these products are. Everybody else is like, oh, these are delicious, and she's like, no, these are disgusting. So it's kind of like she's the only one who's seeing the truth.
Question.
Yeah.
And it was a
Yep.
little long. Can I ask a question? It was a little long for the chat. It's kind of a two-parter. I tend to write really dark in some of my books, and I'm just curious when it shifts from dark to horror, and when you should market it as horror versus just dark, like dark fantasy, dark whatever. I'm just curious on that. Thank you.
Well, my book, Fat Monster, the publisher put it on Amazon as both dark fantasy and horror. So, I mean, it really depends. I mean, the difference is marketing and where it goes on the shelf in the bookstore. So, for Fat Monster, part of the fantasy is the fact that I set it in an alternate version of our world. So, that's why he put it as fantasy. I really don't think of Fat Monster as fantasy. I think of it as straight horror of, Cthulhu mythos spin-off because it's got Shoggoths in it. So, that's up to you. You're writing it. If you think it's, dark fantasy and horror are two peas in a pod, they're two sides of the same coin, you can put it, when you put it on Amazon, you can put it as both. There's no problem with that. If you're doing straight dark fantasy, horror has to have that sin. If you don't have that sin and you just have everything else, then, you could argue that it's not horror. Right?
Yep, and here's where we get into the genre blurring. So we have our speculative fiction umbrella, which is fantasy,
Right.
sci-fi, and horror. And there's lots of stories that cross boundaries, and they
Exactly.
might be like full out sci-fi with a little bit of horror, or full out horror with a little bit of fantasy, whatever. And so it's very difficult until you know what the book is to say, is it one or the other? And I think what Bert is getting at is when there's enough of horror and enough of fantasy, then you market it as both. If it's really truly horror or really truly fantasy, you don't want to do that because you're going to alienate readers, right? So you kind of have to know the genres that sit within speculative fiction and how much of each of those are in your book. And then you look at how you're going to market it.
Right. Because you look at something like Alien. Is Alien sci-fi or is Alien horror?
Or fantasy, because those creatures don't exist.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
Yep. It's a really interesting when you really start looking at stories of how do you put them in, and at the time of publication you look around at the other books that are doing well and see how those books are being positioned.
right. That's why you look at comps.
And you look at those and think, okay, well that's I sort of fit there. That's okay. I can do that. Or no, that's too far off from me. I can't market it as that. And you ask your beta readers too. It's a good question for them. What do you think this is? Especially if you have beta readers who are experienced in beta reading and know their genres, you'll get feedback. Alrighty, well, Bert, that was fantastic. I'm so sorry that you couldn't come on video.
I am too, because I look so fun, but at least Julia put up the picture so everybody got to see me.
Yes, that's fantastic. And really appreciate you doing this. I know everybody in the community does. I'm going to throw up your book link one more time at the bottom for anyone who's interested in getting Bert's book. It would be great if you bought it. She came here out of the goodness of her own heart to share this, and it's very exciting for me. I'm not a horror expert at all. And so it was really interesting to see how you positioned horror in the context of Fictionary and the 5 story arc scenes, and just super well done. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. And if anybody thinks of any other questions, you can go back into the Fictionary page and just put it underneath the course, and I'll try to get to it and answer it, or you can private message me on Fictionary.
Nice. All righty. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great
Thank you.
Halloween, and I hope you like my costume.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.